I appreciate the opportunity, and I want to thank the Planning Committee for the EETC. I think this is a very, very good conference, great opportunity and idea. And one of those things that, obviously there are a couple of reasons why I may be here. A, I'm a local guy, but two, I am the sum in what I do every day of the whole of the parts out here. We are the application of what you all are doing in a virtual environment. And as Benj mentioned, and I can call you Benj, right? Okay, I don't want to be too formal, But as he mentioned, I run Utah Virtual Academy. We are the largest charter school in the state. We are the first virtual school in the state. We have over 2,000 students, and we do kindergarten through the 12th grade. So the applicability of what we do to early childhood education is very good. We're also managed by K-12, and I was also mentioning this. We're managed by K-12, and so we utilize their curriculum. One of the things that actually introduced me to Waterford, as we have been talking, is the fact that we probably don't do early childhood as well as we do maybe 4th grade up through middle school and then high school. And so very interesting to see these particular applications of what you're doing for children. As the title mentions, and this will be the title of my book, When I Retire, Being Principal in My Pajamas, when they asked me to come to work for K-12, I was very, very excited because this will tell you exactly what part of my world looks like. That is the view from my office. It's exactly 7 feet away from my bedroom. And when my teachers, when we hire them, the fact that they don't have to get out of their sweats or even their pajamas sometimes is very exciting to them. In a virtual environment, they work from home. The kids also learn from home, and so this is an opportunity to, especially in an economic situation like we have, to be able to save some money and still get the job done. But this will give you an idea of what part of my life is like. Our offices, however, are down in Murray, and so I'm there a bit of time. So how I got here, and the question was asked when I was asked to be a speaker, is how I got from this evolution of being an administrator, because I've been an administrator for 15 years and an educator for 19. And given the agrarian model that we exist in education, this is quite a journey to go from being a classroom teacher where you're using textbooks and things like that to running a school in which, as we've seen over the past month, in which technology can make things change in the blink of an eye. And how do you go about getting that particular evolution? The first thing, and I think every new teacher has to encounter this, especially on the high school level, is being across the hall as a brand new teacher from a history teacher who, every time you walk by their room, the students have their books out, he's sitting at his desk, and he points to them to flip through the pages. I was an absolute fan of history because it came alive for me while I was in university. And every year I would watch this particular teacher lose students. And it was because it was not interactive for them. And so watching this tells you exactly what not to do as an educator. And so you start finding things. We developed multimedia courses, a couple of colleagues and I, while we were there. I told my students, you will get marked points down if you bring your textbook to my classroom. If I can't, as a teacher, figure out what to do with 6,000 years of human history without having you regurgitate what you're reading and should be reading in your homework at home anyway, then I need to find another profession. And so this was probably the start of that journey. It became magnified when I became the principal of a very affluent school in the Salt Lake City School District. Of course, trying to be as green and conservationist as I can be, I decided I wanted the school to go paperless. And so I got tired of having my secretary put things in boxes, and we were just experimenting with things such as smart boards and other types of technology. So I had an edict, which for those who have been school administrators never do in a heavy union school district. I created an edict that all of my teachers, we were not going to use paper anymore, we were only going to do things through attachments on email. The next day I got a phone call from the superintendent who had just had a conversation with the union president, and we were no longer doing that because they found out that there were teachers in my building who couldn't even open their emails. Now, I have an 82-year-old mother-in-law, who can at least do that. And she wonders why and how this can even be a school that I'm in charge of. But to have teachers and then have to deal with the political fight of the email battles, if you will, got to be a little ridiculous. At that point, as we needed to fill staff, I filled staff with very high-tech, proficient teachers. And to the point that it almost became an embarrassment if you didn't know how to do these things. We'll talk a little bit about that more. Okay, the swipe card. So, I'm over in Prague, and I notice a guy walking up to a vending machine, soda machine, and he takes out a charge card and he wipes it in front of, not pushing it in like we do with an ATM. He wipes it in front of, and the next thing he punches a button and his soda comes out. So I called my son, who actually worked for Spring Communication here, and I said, Nathan, I just seen this amazing thing. And I had seen a guy do it with his cell phone earlier. And he said, Dad, we know this technology exists, but there are restrictions here from being able to bring it in from Asia and from Europe. And it was a real eye-opener to the obligation I had then to try and find, especially what you all are doing, and bring that into the students that I was teaching. So I was at East High, which is up on the East Bench here in Salt Lake, as their assistant principal. And so we started looking at other types of things that we could do to bring in to enhance what the students were doing, especially low-functioning students, so we could get them to this kind of state-of-the-art thing. And then I took over Utah Virtual Academy, or started it actually. I'm the guy who opened the doors, if you will. And we hit a wall after our first year of hiring. Got my staff on, we put them through, and we were all, we call it feeding through a fire hose. And so we were all completely overwhelmed about what we were doing with this. But we went through our training, and everybody survived the first year, and then we started hiring new staff. And these teachers had immersed themselves in this completely technologically based environment. And so I would get resumes, and I interview literally hundreds and hundreds of teachers every year. And as you can imagine, the fact is, they like the idea where the school uniforms might have footies in them, in terms of what they're wearing. They can work from home if they have families. It becomes very efficient. And so I get a lot of cover letters that tell me that they are the tech gurus in their building. So we put them through a tech test. 70% of the people fail. This is a tech test in which we ask them to create a spreadsheet. We ask them to put animation, and I'm talking simple animation. What you saw here, where it comes across nicely and very quiet, is very simple stuff. We ask them to do that. We ask them to actually find something on the internet. And in fact, there are a lot of people who can't even do that, let alone attach a document to an email. And so what passes for the use of technology in our schools today is a travesty. And so my goal, my passion, I'm an evangelist for this. The folks at K-12 know that I drank the Kool-Aid from the minute. It took me 2 minutes to leave the Salt Lake City School District when I saw this, and they know that. And I'm an evangelist for this, so I appreciate the opportunity for being able to speak here and again talk about that coalescence of what we do. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the virtual model, and then we'll talk about some applications. In a nutshell, the virtual model is essentially just 3 things. It's the online curriculum, it's teacher support, and I'll talk a little bit because we have some nuances in what we do, but it's teacher support and then physical materials. That creates the virtual environment. Every kid who needs a microscope in my school gets a microscope. There's no sharing that they have to worry about. My favorite is the 5th grade science curriculum because we use a quarry. Every kid gets dirt from the same quarry throughout the country. Okay, so the experiments are consistent. And the continuity factor of being able to do the experiment right is that critical. And again, there are some nuances to these models, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The particular types of school, let me tell you what virtual schooling is not. We are a state charter school. My students have to take attendance. My students have to do state assessments. We have our own assessments that they have to do. They have to meet particular data matrices in which they have to hit particular marks of mastery. It is not homeschooling. And while there is nothing essentially wrong with that inherently, the fact is we're a very structured academic environment. And to get a good quality virtual program, you need those kind of structures and confines to allow the kids to be able to be directed. So 13% of my families or 13% of my students, I should say, are homeschool students. They're the ones who have finally said, okay, we really like the curriculum. We don't really like the fact that you're telling us what we have to do, but we like it. So the other 87% of the students in my school are kids who are there for various reasons. They're athletes, they're actors, they're kids who want to accelerate, they're kids who maybe need to pull back. We say that for every kid, we have 2,050 kids. There are 2,050 reasons why my students are there. Okay, so it's not that. We call it schooling at home to make that distinction from homeschooling. All right, the types of virtual schools. And again, you'll notice it's in quotations, traditional virtual school. And essentially, the model is really simple. You have an office, and I'll show you ours in just a second. Teachers work from home, students learn from home, parents support, all good. Very, very flexible. Literally, it's a 300, and I just did the math on this, 351-day thing, because we have about 3 weeks or 2 weeks in which we have to transition to the next year. And I know my math was wrong. For any math teachers out there, I know that was wrong. Anyway, but that's the traditional model. My teachers work an 8 to 5 day, Monday through Friday. They are also on a strict 12-month contract, which allows them the accessibility that kids need to be able to meet with their teachers. It's a very corporate model, and my teachers like it, surprisingly. So any of those who you hear teachers talking about, well, what about summers? Well, we put them to work in the summers. They plan, they put together committees and things like that. So the hybrid virtual. A hybrid virtual is essentially a school that requires that the kids, and it's usually driven by state law, requires them to be in a building for about anywhere from 3 to 10 hours a week, a couple of days a week. So they go there and they do their thing. Teachers are there, and then it's a face-to-face thing. And again, usually that's driven by state law. But we are finding with hybrid models, especially in the high school, that high school students really benefit from a hybrid model versus maybe a pure traditional model, virtual model. And then the flex schools. And flex schools are a traditional type school. So it's the 7 hours a day, Monday through Friday. But the kids operate at their own pace. They get on the computer, they operate at their own pace. The teachers are there to act as coaches and tutoring and things like that. But they do, it really is individualized education in a particular building. So this is the school. It's about 2,200 square feet. All the administration is there with a couple of clerical folks, and that's it. We have a boardroom that we do meetings in, but literally everything, including special education. Where are my special educators? Do we have any that are in here? Okay, the interesting thing about this is we're able to do special education needs virtually as well. So we do very little in terms of with students in this particular office. All right, so I'm going to let you read a little bit about this, but in essence, I've kind of covered it. Again, we're managed, we're fully accredited. Mastery-based, our authorizer is the state of Utah. Unlike some other states where districts have to be in charge of those particular charter schools, we don't have that. And the high school program, we're the only school in the state that offers the entire full gamut of AP, and that's because we have sister schools who are affiliated with K-12, and we put those kids together with kids from other states. So literally, the teacher could be 2 hours time-wise away, but they get to have that opportunity. We also work with some rural schools to help them on single classes. We're the only we feel like we're the only charter school that we can go to a school district, especially rural, and say, we're your friend. We're not building a building. I'm not sucking kids away per se. I want to help you. And so we can help rural schools also with those kind of needs. All right, really quickly, the expectation of a student, if you're kindergarten through the 6th grade, maybe 7th grade, 5.5 hours a day is what the expectation is. Keep in mind, too, this is 5.5 hours of pure learning. No distractions from the classroom mischief or anything like that. We expect them to master this. We also expect them to do attendance. And literally, the assessments are done online. So they can go in, if say they go on vacation, they can come back, take the test, and move on. And that's really how it is. If they don't hit 80%, they can't move on in the curriculum. The expectation of the parent is basically they're the learning coach. And that's how we refer to them, as the learning coach. They are, we put them through extensive training so that they know the lessons. They have the teacher manuals. They have everything that they need, the access to the platforms, the access to all the data programs. They can see what their student is doing right up to the minute. If a student is failing math, they can go in and see that that student that week only did 2 minutes worth of math. That's probably why you're not doing well this week. And so it's a great opportunity. It is the epitome of parent involvement in education. The younger you are, the more it's like reading at home. Bedtime stories, mommy and daddy helping with the math. The older you get, we expect that the parent will work towards having that kid become independent, and our teachers help them in that regard. By the time they're seniors, the parent is really a monitor, making sure that things are getting done and turned in. And the role of the teacher. And my teachers probably do better data, maybe, than anybody in this room. And it's because they have to. They know, right to the minute, they know what adjustments they need to make for every single kid in their class. And these are teachers who average 70 students in their classes. But keep in mind that because there are no disruptions in what they do, especially for struggling students, they actually average about 40% more time that they're able to spend on student needs. And because they go 8 to 5, they can adjust schedules to be able to meet with parents, either in a virtual or if they need to in a face-to-face. So my teachers literally become the experts on not only the technology, but the data and everything like that. They do direct instruction about 4 to 5 hours a week, and they have office hours in which they do tutoring, one-on-one, small group, that type of thing. And so there is a lot of direct instruction. The advantage that they have is they don't have to design the curriculum, so they can focus on really the art of teaching. And that is highly important to them. Advantages of a virtual school. There are a lot. Flexibility. My students can move at their own pace. I have students who are in the 4th grade who are doing 7th and 8th grade work. There is one disadvantage in the state of Utah. If you want to do 9th grade curriculum, you can, but you can't get any credit for it unless you're registered as an entire full-time 9th grade student. They do have that flexibility. Again, it's a 24/7, moving at their own pace. They do have the teacher support. They don't have to deal with issues that every other kid. I had a buddy in the Weber School District who said, well, what about the socialization aspect? And I said, Drew, tell me how many kids you've suspended, the district suspended this year. And he said, well, we had 2,500 suspensions. And this was through December of that particular year. 2,500 suspensions in the Weber School District. And I said, Drew, I haven't had one. He said, well, what about the socialization? I said, do you mean the fact that you're herding kids from class to class because the bells rang and they're still out in the halls? You're getting them out of bathrooms? I said, how about all the stuff that goes on at lunch? We don't deal with that. Okay, so you have that advantage of a student not having those particular distractions. The one-on-one that comes from a teacher, because that teacher can schedule that particular time, is invaluable, especially to special ed students and resource students. We find that a special ed or a resource student will generally gain about 1.5 years each year because they get more one-on-one time. So you have that. Plus, we just think it's a great curriculum. And any virtual school that is not finding the very best curriculum, and it's not just companies like K-12 or Connections, but open source type school like the Open High School, their obligation in this particular environment is to find that. So the students are getting access to that curriculum. Also, there is no grade inflation. When you do the assessment, the computer doesn't know if you're the captain of the football team. It doesn't know if you have a great smile and you're able to schmooze the teacher. It doesn't know that. It just knows that you either know or you don't know. And so you have the advantage of pure grade assessment. The disadvantages of virtual school. We noticed that one of the big disadvantages, especially in the economic times, is the fact that we're very parent intensive. If we don't have a parent at home, especially with the little ones, it's disastrous, and it is that crucial. So that is one of the linchpins on a disadvantage to the school. Again, I talked a little bit about the socialization. We don't view that. We find that our parents they have their kids in piano, they have their kids in co-op groups, they have their kids in soccer, they have their kids in every possible thing that you can imagine. And so we don't see necessarily the socialization. What we do find, though, because of that non-grade inflation, that we lose especially high school students because they're worried about their grade point average. I've had students who were 4.0 students at very good high schools in this state who came to us, they were there for a semester, maybe a year, and they withdrew because they were worried that their grade point average was going to suffer. What I tried to do is draw the correlation that your grade point average will be exactly, and should be exactly correlated to your ACT or SAT score. It's a hard argument to sell to parents. and again, to a senior who's really wanting to look for a scholarship based on a grade point average. So, and I'll be available for questions and things like that later on if you want to ask some other disadvantages or advantages of this. This is just a puzzle of what it looks like, and we do view it as that. These are all very integral parts of what it is we do. All right, so let's talk a little bit about virtual education in the future world. And I had to throw in a graphic here, a GIF for you guys, so you could know that I knew how to do some of this stuff. So, all right, so let's talk about how the world is seeing virtual education. And we'll start with Singapore. Singapore is very interesting. It's a very small country, but it's very progressive in what it does. And the simple fact is, in Singapore, all staff members must take 2 weeks training every year in the virtual delivery method. And the students are required, and this is from kindergarten to postgraduate, to take at least one class in virtual education. And by the time they're in graduate school, it's usually about half. And so it's very interesting in what they're doing. The next thing, Mexico last year, or 2 years ago, excuse me, 2 years ago digitized their entire national curriculum. So any student in a rural village in Mexico City, if they have access to a computer, they can get on and see exactly what they need to do. And so a very important step for a country as large as Mexico. This is very interesting. In The Economist, November 18th, they published an article about a company called BrightSpark, and it's actually an NGO. And what they're doing is they're linking low-income students, struggling students in Doddington Estates in the south part of London with math tutors in India. $12 a session, or 12 pounds, excuse me, $19 a session at the current rate. And they're finding tremendous results. Now, keep in mind, again, this is a video thing that they're doing thousands and thousands of miles away. That tells you how small the world can be in a technology environment such as this. Also, Britain is taking some huge steps working with India and China to start developing more holistic type of virtual programs. And I'm going to talk a little bit, and where are the folks from Austria and Germany? Please raise your hand. Okay, please tell me if I'm mispronouncing this. It's Uwe and Hannelore Romeike? Romeike, thank you. Very important case, and it's going to really be one of the pinnacle cases in what's going to happen probably with the governments of Europe. Homeschooling, generally outside the United States, Canada, Great Britain to a certain extent, even if it's legal, is still discouraged. There's an acculturation aspect that goes with education. About being, learning how to be an American, learning how to be a Czech, learning how to be a German or a Brit or any of that. And so it's very often frowned on, if not illegal. And in the case of Germany, it is illegal. Unless they've changed that. Have they changed that within the last 6 months? Okay. So it's illegal. All right. So 2006, the Romeikes are fundamentalist Christian parents. And they were having a very difficult time in being able to get what they need for their kids based on their beliefs. So they stopped sending their kids to school. And for 2 years, the German government tried to work with them. And in the end, in 2008, they literally were fined thousands and thousands of dollars and arrested. They sought refuge, political asylum, which I find so amazing for their religious beliefs, as homeschool parents in the United States. They're currently residing in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And the Homeschool Defense Association, Legal Defense Association, was the one who handled the case. But this is going to present a huge opportunity for those governments to be able to fix what will be a roller coaster and will be literally a snowball of what could happen. And the simple fact is, this will give them an opportunity to be able to create virtual environments that they will be able to control the curriculum, but also allow them to be able to have this opportunity to do homeschooling. And it will come. Trust me, this particular association, Legal Defense, is very aggressive. And so they will look at giving parents that. We entertained the last 2 years a Chinese and Pakistani delegation. And one of the interesting things that they're doing, it's hard to find good quality rural teachers. And so what they're doing and looking at are setting up centers in places like Islamabad and Karachi to be able then to do the teaching and send those images and the curriculum out into small satellites. A room a quarter of this size with computers around could literally have the highest quality teaching that country could provide. And in poor countries, this will be essential. Current models that can be enhanced. Again, the scaled-back village model, what I just described a little bit in Pakistan and China, could be applied to any country with a heavy rural population. Have it in the big centers, send it out. using things such as the one laptop. And as the technology and expense on this particular item and this particular organization becomes lower, you're talking a computer literally at $100 now. They're experimenting with solar cells and better satellite pickups. You literally could have a village of 3 or 4 children who would have the exact same quality education as a student in New York City. And then partner national schools. So one country working with another country, a rich and a poor country, to help offset costs. And then, of course, what we see right now with private schools especially, single and supplemental courses from all over the world. So if they can't have the quality right there, they can do it in that particular environment. All right, so virtual education in the United States. Clayton Christensen in Disrupting Class said that by 2019, 50% of the classes, especially for high school, will be in a virtual context, online. He's revised that. He met with the charter directors in the state of Utah about 3 months ago, and he said it's going to be 2015, and it will be at least 50% of the classes. And there's legislation right now, Senate Bill 65, Senator Stevenson's bill that's working on that right now. The exponential growth. In 3 years, it's tripled. It's probably 2.2 million right now, and these are students who are taking full-time in either virtual or online. So the growth potential is there. And then the current attitudes, especially within states. All states have some sort of distance learning available. 39 states have statewide. We are one of them. In fact, we have a number of options here. The other 11 states, though, have their virtual options and their distance options available through individual districts. So there are students in parts of those states, such as Massachusetts, that don't have access to that as they would, and so they have to find other means, such as private and things like that. But that's gaining traction. And the legislation that is currently in about half of those 11 states is very, very encouraging towards having that. All right, so issues confronting virtual education. There is a perception that because we are virtual and we don't use walls or desks or tables, that we should be a lot cheaper. We are telling people, don't do that. Let us show you how to more efficiently spend that dollar versus cutting that dollar in half. A brick never taught a kid. Spend it on teachers and spend it on curriculum. Cultural discomfort. The fact is there are people who just aren't comfortable with this model. They need face-to-face, and it's hard to overcome that. Job protection. The unions do not like virtual education. And the simple fact is, if I have 70 students in my class and we're showing great results, a teachers union doesn't want to deal with that. Okay, it means loss of jobs. And especially for those staff, and I'm sorry, I don't want to insult anyone here, but those staff who are at a particular age where they are not digital natives, and I'm not a digital native, so I put myself in that category. The fact is, if they don't have the skills to be able to tackle these things, they are not going to be effective and useful later on in education, especially in a virtual environment. Private corporation versus public funding dilemma. All right, the fact is I work for a corporation. The fact is there are a lot of people who don't like state money going to line, as we've been told, the greedy pockets of corporate America. And the fact is that every district uses corporations to provide their curriculum. If you don't think so, go look at your textbook from Prentice Hall. Look at your computers from Dell and Apple. The fact is that's the way it works. And so it's an absolutely ridiculous argument that we should not be spending state money when corporations, privately or publicly held, or other types of organizations can provide it in a better fashion. The argument now, especially in the state of Utah, is, well, those are jobs then. You're actually sending it outside the state, and we want it to come back into Utah. Okay, maybe a better argument, but it's still the same argument. Okay. And again, these are just issues confronting virtual education. And finally, and it comes down to a philosophical difference between the Jeffersonian aspect of why we do education, which is to create an educated citizenry, which is a better citizenry, and the liberty issue of it's my child, I want to dictate what they have. And so these two worlds collide a lot in a virtual context. And it's not one that's ever probably going to go away in the United States. Parent choice, which I think is generally a very good thing, is not going to bend. And the state, as we've seen in the political aspect of it, is not going to bend either. All right, so one last slide and a couple of things here. Virtual education in charters and district. By 2015, every district will have some sort of virtual or distance program that they're doing here in the state of Utah. The quality of those will be anywhere from the most primitive, as you can imagine, where a person in an after-school program still to this day hands somebody a packet book and tells them to fill it in and then get it back to me. That still exists in 2011, folks. It's crazy. It just boggles my mind. All the way up to online programs or utilizing things like the electronic high school or other types of more sophisticated type of methods. There are 4 charters that are in the state, or will be in the state, 2 that are in existence, us, Utah Virtual Academy, the Open High School, which is OHS, and next year, Connections Academy. And if you follow this kind of thing, K-12 and Connections are the 2 largest providers of virtual education, K through 12 in the world. We're the largest, they're second. They've got schools in about 2/3 of the states that we do. And then Connections Academy will be in, and Alianza will be our first hybrid. They will have centers in the low-income areas in the state of Utah, specifically the high population areas such as Salt Lake, Ogden, Provo. Their population and what they'll be dealing with will be low-income and predominantly minority students. And they'll be doing a hybrid, and it'll be more like a flex school where the students will come to them. Legislation, Senate Bill 65, statewide online education. This, Senator Stevenson really wants kids, it doesn't matter if you're private or public, to be able to have access to virtual education. And so this particular bill will allow students next year to have up to 3 of their classes in a virtual environment from one of the virtual providers, either Electronic High School, us, Open High School, Connections. It will eventually go to all 6. And they can still be part of the school districts. There's some funding issues with that, as well as some other political issues, but it's very, very encouraging for a flexibility standpoint. We have 2,050 kids. I could have 12,000 students in terms of part-time by next year. It's really very exciting, but pretty daunting. And then finally, the push. In the state of Utah, we're trying to remove caps. We are capped at how many students we can have in our school. And so removing that, plus charters, especially virtual charters, having equal access to income, state funding, is going to be very, very important. And those are probably the biggest issues. You eliminate the caps. You also eliminate any limitations you have on the number of charter schools and choice. So, but that is the state of the state and virtual education. So, thank you. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes. Any questions? And again, I talk really fast, so I apologize for those who... Yes?
Is this just demonstrating that you've mastered skills, or when does it involve serious problem solving?
Absolutely. Excellent question. Okay, and I'm presenting on Friday morning too, so I will have some of that. But essentially we're required to use all the state assessments. So we have criterion reference testing at the end of the year. Through the course of the year, we have direct writing assessment. We also have a reading assessment that the state requires. We use a program called Scantron, which allows us to see performance. So we do Scantron testing 3 times a year, beginning, so we can see where the kids are, in the middle, and then at the end. And we actually think this is a much more reliable aspect of that. So the other aspect of it is all of the online curriculum, when you're finished with a section or a unit, there is an assessment that the students have to finish and complete and get 80% before they can move on to the next thing.
But is some of that testing open-ended, like solving problems?
Yes.
There might be many different solutions that would be valid?
Yes. Yeah, and so the thinking skills, in fact, K-12, and again, we use their curriculum, has spent a lot of money on creating those type of things so that we can see that the students are actually thinking. And this has been one of those things, especially for our high school students and the parents, there's been some pushback because in their mind, their kid got it right, they just want them to move on. And my teachers are saying no. We use a program called Turnitin, which is a plagiarism program, but it also analyzes papers. So we can see how much maybe, if you're not going to plagiarize, chances are you may do an entire paper of quotes and pulls from other, right? Okay, so it analyzes that particular paper, but it also gives that student recommendations on where their thought structure and things such as syntax should go. And so it helps them become more analytical in what their papers are doing. But yes, yeah, we're trying very hard on that. And again, it's a good curriculum, so that's a huge part of that component. So yeah, we do want them thinking. So appreciate that. Great question, though. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about access for students, access to connectivity and also to hardware or software as needed, and what you do to address that?
Yeah, because we're a large state, there are a few pockets, especially as territorial and proprietary as certain companies are within communities. Obviously, all of our students, if they're in our school, have access to that. I will give you an example real quickly. We had a family that lived in the southern part of the state. In order to talk to my teacher and in order to get the internet, they were on a generator system. He literally had to climb a hill to be able to get cell phone reception to talk to my teacher. Okay, yeah, there's a problem with that particular family, and what can we do with that? We provide internet reimbursements every year, and for a very small population and sections of the state, it does present a problem. We think we probably have about 99% of the state covered where we can provide that education, but yeah. And so we do look at participating with the state, UEN, and some of the other folks who are able to get grants and things like that to help them be able to provide those accesses. But yeah, it is one of the barriers. Small as it is, it still is one of the barriers.
We have time for one more question.
Oh, yes. Hi.
What opportunities are there for collaboration in learning among the students?
Our parents put together co-op groups. My teachers actually, they operate in what's called an Illuminate classroom, and it's a meeting room. But everything you can do on a smart board, whiteboard, in a classroom, you can do in this. So we put together small groups. We can break them down into separate rooms within this. So the actual collaboration time is actually quite good. I worry more about my teachers and their collaboration time and being able, because they live in far distances and we do like to do face-to-face. But there's probably not much of a fallout in terms of pure collaboration. There is obviously in the face-to-face collaboration. But we have a device on one of our platforms that is a family directory. And students actually can key in their information and find out where all their classmates are specific to grade, or a couple of grades, so they can do a range, and see where their classmates are in proximity to themselves. And so we're finding that's really effective. My parent organizations, I have a booster and a parent organization like a PTA, and they actually put together activities each Friday for the students to be able to get together. Because we're a very urban state, most of our population being in the Wasatch Front, it's a lot easier, especially for my high school kids, to be able to get together, and we know that they do. You know, they tell us at least that they do. So I'd say in terms of pure collaboration, not a problem. In terms of the face-to-face, much more complicated. Okay. Thank you.